Hello and welcome to Starlit Science. Before we embark on today's journey, take a moment to like this video and subscribe so you never miss an exploration of the hidden wonders of our world. Now, tell me, where are you watching or listening from? Maybe the city lights of a bustling metropolis, or somewhere quieter under an open sky. Wherever you are, your vantage point is part of a vast network, just like the migratory birds we're about to follow, travelling thousands of miles guided by nature's invisible lines, celestial patterns, and magnetic whispers. Today we'll uncover the secrets of how birds navigate the globe with astonishing precision, crossing oceans, deserts, and continents, relying on tools both familiar and mysterious. From landmarks etched into the landscape, to the sun and stars overhead, to the subtle hum of Earth's magnetic field, and even quantum phenomena unfolding in their eyes, these remarkable creatures chart paths that have fascinated scientists for centuries. So settle in and let your imagination take flight as we explore the extraordinary science behind bird migration and the subtle forces that guide them across the planet, often more accurately than any human-made compass. Bird migration is one of nature's most remarkable phenomena, a complex ballet of physiology, physics, and cognition that unfolds across the skies year after year. From tiny warblers weighing barely more than a handful of coins to massive albatrosses gliding effortlessly over thousands of kilometers of open ocean, birds undertake journeys that test the limits of endurance, navigation, and environmental awareness. These migrations are not simply repetitive movements between breeding and wintering grounds. They are intricately coordinated feats of biological engineering, shaped by evolution over millions of years, refined through trial and error across generations, and guided by forces both visible and invisible. The question that has fascinated scientists for centuries is deceptively simple. How do birds know where to go? How does a tiny bird, released in a strange location hundreds of kilometers from its home, manage to find its way with astonishing accuracy, often returning to the exact same tree, cliff, or patch of marsh that it inhabited the previous year? This is not a question that can be answered with a single explanation, because bird navigation is multidimensional, involving multiple overlapping systems. Birds rely on the sun, the stars, magnetic fields, olfactory cues, visual landmarks, learned social information, and even internal biological clocks to orient themselves across vast landscapes. Each of these mechanisms contributes to an intricate tapestry of orientation strategies that scientists are only beginning to fully understand. In exploring this puzzle, we move beyond classical biology into interdisciplinary realms. Neuroethology, the study of the neural basis of natural behaviors, reveals how birds process spatial information, store memory of routes, and integrate sensory inputs into navigational decisions. Quantum biology, a field once considered abstract and speculative, now offers potential explanations for the ways birds may detect Earth's magnetic field through chemical processes in their eyes. These approaches illustrate that bird navigation is not only a biological feat, but also a physics problem, a neurological challenge, and even a quantum mechanical mystery. It is an extraordinary demonstration of nature's ability to harness the principles of multiple scientific disciplines simultaneously. Researchers around the world have studied this question from many angles. Wolfgang Wiltschko and Roswitha Wiltschko in Germany have devoted decades to understanding magnetoreception, the ability of birds to detect the orientation of Earth's magnetic field, demonstrating that European robins can use magnetic inclination and intensity to maintain a consistent heading. Henrik Moritzen and his team at the University of Oldenburg have expanded this research, exploring radical pair mechanisms in the retina that could allow birds to literally see the magnetic field as visual patterns superimposed on the world. Meanwhile, experiments with homing pigeons, pioneered over a century ago by Francesco Papi in Italy, reveal that birds combine local visual cues with magnetic cues to navigate home with remarkable precision, even when displaced hundreds of kilometers from familiar territory. Migration is not a purely instinctive phenomenon, nor is it entirely learned. Young birds inherit innate directional preferences encoded in their genes, yet these are refined and calibrated through experience, social learning, and environmental feedback. Juvenile birds often follow adults on their first migration, learning the timing, stopover locations, and subtle route choices that maximize survival. Even solitary migrants are thought to use trial and error during their initial journeys, gradually honing their internal maps and adjusting to variations in wind, weather, and geographic obstacles. This combination of instinct and experience allows populations to maintain remarkably consistent migration patterns, even in the face of environmental changes or disruptions. Understanding migration also requires appreciating the physical and energetic constraints that shape it. Birds do not migrate in isolation from the laws of physics. They must balance the mechanics of flight, energy expenditure, and aerodynamic efficiency with the demands of navigation. A bar-tailed godwit, for example, can fly more than 11,000 kilometers non-stop from Alaska to New Zealand, relying on energy stores accumulated months in advance. The mechanics of soaring, flapping, and gliding are coupled with real-time decision-making about altitude, wind conditions, and route adjustments, revealing that migration is not merely a predetermined path, but a dynamic interaction between body, brain, and environment. Perhaps what is most striking about bird migration is the elegance with which these multiple systems integrate. Sun compasses work best during the day, star compasses guide nocturnal migrants, magnetic cues provide orientation when celestial cues are obscured, and visual and olfactory landmarks allow fine-scale adjustments close to familiar territory. Birds are continually assessing, weighing, and prioritizing these cues, making navigation a process that is both adaptive and resilient. It is a system that balances redundancy and flexibility, allowing birds to compensate for errors, unexpected storms, or temporary disorientation. In considering migration, we also confront the deeper question of perception itself. How does a bird's mind perceive a magnetic field, a polarized pattern of a light in the sky, or the subtle odor gradients carried on the wind? These questions touch on the interface between sensory biology and cognition, inviting speculation about forms of perception that humans cannot directly experience. The work of researchers like Klaus Schulten, who modelled radical pair reactions in cryptochromes, suggests that quantum processes could play a role in translating environmental information into a sensory map, a radical idea that bridges the gap between biology and physics. The study of bird migration, therefore, is not a single narrative but a journey through multiple dimensions of science. It is an exploration of evolution, showing how natural selection favours precision, endurance, and adaptability. It is a journey through the physics of motion and magnetism, demonstrating that living organisms can exploit forces at scales ranging from the planetary to the quantum. It is a journey through the neural and cognitive landscapes of birds, revealing how brains encode, store, and utilize spatial information. And it is a journey into the natural poetry of life itself, where instinct, learning, and environment converge to produce feats that inspire both awe and scientific inquiry. To begin to understand bird migration is to begin to appreciate a world in which every movement is informed by multiple layers of information, where evolution has engineered a living compass capable of responding to subtle cues across thousands of kilometers. It is a story of precision, resilience, and ingenuity that transcends simple explanation. And as we follow these remarkable travelers through their journeys, we gain insight not only into the mechanisms of navigation, but also into the ways that life, in all its complexity, interacts with the forces of the planet, the stars, and perhaps even the hidden principles of the quantum world. Across the globe, bird migration occurs on a scale that is both staggering and awe-inspiring. Some species, such as the Arctic tern, undertake what is perhaps the most extraordinary journey of all, travelling from the Arctic to the Antarctic and back each year, a round trip exceeding 70,000 kilometres. This is a journey that spans multiple continents, crossing oceans, ice sheets, and extreme weather conditions demanding precise timing, endurance, and navigational skill. The sooty shearwater, a seabird capable of circumnavigating the Pacific Ocean, follows a figure-8 route covering distances of more than 60,000 kilometres annually, demonstrating that migration is not just a seasonal movement, but a dynamic interaction with planetary-scale geography and ocean currents. Even land birds like the bar-tailed godwit perform incredible non-stop flights of over 11,000 kilometres from Alaska to New Zealand, relying on accumulated fat reserves as fuel, while navigating without the benefit of visual landmarks for much of the journey. These extreme cases highlight a broader concept in migration biology, the existence of migratory superhighways. These are well-established routes that many species follow with remarkable consistency, often determined by geography, wind patterns, and ecological needs. Rivers, mountain ranges, coastlines, and even chains of islands act as natural guides, funneling birds along paths that optimize energy efficiency and survival. Superimposed on these well-traveled corridors are irregular or exploratory routes, undertaken by younger or less experienced birds, or by species that exploit shifting food sources and climatic conditions. These alternative paths illustrate the flexibility and adaptability inherent in avian migration, demonstrating that while many routes are stable, birds are capable of adjusting trajectories in response to changing environmental conditions. Climatology plays a central role in shaping these pathways. Wind patterns, jet streams, and seasonal shifts in temperature influence not only the direction and speed of flight, but also the timing of departure and arrival. Tailwinds can dramatically reduce the energetic cost of migration, whereas headwinds or storms can force detours or even temporary halts along the route. Researchers studying the sooty shearwater have observed that these birds actively select paths that maximize favorable wind conditions, sometimes extending their route to exploit persistent tailwinds, demonstrating a remarkable integration of meteorological awareness into migratory behavior. Similarly, geomagnetism contributes an invisible scaffold upon which these journeys are plotted. Variations in the Earth's magnetic field, including inclination and intensity, provide cues that help birds maintain orientation when visual landmarks are sparse or obscured. Research led by Henrik Moritzen and colleagues has explored how even subtle changes in magnetic inclination can guide migratory paths, suggesting that birds use a combination of innate sensitivity and learned calibration to align with the planet's geomagnetic signature. The work of Susan Weller has further expanded our understanding of migratory mapping, moving beyond well-known species to document patterns in less studied birds across Africa, South America, and the Pacific. Weller's research emphasizes that migration is not merely a straight line between 2 points, but a complex network of pathways influenced by seasonal food, availability, breeding, and wintering habitat quality, predation risk, and interspecific competition. By combining satellite tracking data, field observations, and statistical modeling, her studies reveal both the consistency and variability in migratory behavior, showing that even small deviations can have significant consequences for survival and reproductive success. This research underscores that migration is a multidimensional strategy, finely tuned by evolution to balance risk, reward, and resource optimization. Migration also involves timing on a global scale. Birds synchronize their movements with seasonal cycles, often departing when conditions are most favorable, and arriving at breeding or wintering grounds with precision. This timing requires not only a sense of distance and direction, but also an internal ability to anticipate environmental shifts. Photoperiod, the length of daylight, acts as a critical cue, informing birds when to begin their journey. Temperature changes, precipitation patterns, and food abundance further refine this timing, and deviations can result in missed breeding opportunities or increased mortality. The integration of these temporal cues with spatial navigation illustrates the remarkable sophistication of migratory planning, combining sensory perception, memory, and physiological readiness into a coordinated whole. Even when following familiar routes, birds encounter unpredictability. Storms, habitat changes, and human-made obstacles can disrupt established patterns, necessitating flexibility and problem-solving. Juvenile birds often learn routes from adults, yet even experienced birds must adjust for unexpected conditions. Some species, like the white stork, have been observed to delay departure or shift their path to take advantage of thermal updrafts, demonstrating an active engagement with environmental cues rather than passive reliance on instinct. This adaptive behavior is a hallmark of successful migration, highlighting the interplay between innate mechanisms, learned experience, and real-time environmental assessment. The scale of migration also raises questions about cognitive and sensory capacity. Navigating thousands of kilometers with precision implies that birds maintain spatial awareness at both local and continental scales. Cognitive mapping, memory consolidation, and the ability to integrate multiple sensory inputs simultaneously are fundamental to this process. Birds must interpret visual landmarks, celestial patterns, magnetic signals, olfactory cues, and atmospheric information, combining these inputs into a coherent sense of direction and position. The capacity to do so reliably, year after year, speaks to a level of neural complexity and sensory integration that challenges human understanding and continues to inspire research across fields from neuroethology to quantum biology. Energy management is equally crucial on these epic journeys. The Barteld-Godwitz non-stop flight from Alaska to New Zealand requires storing fat equivalent to over 50% of its body mass, while Arctic terns strategically stop at feeding grounds in the Arctic and Antarctic to replenish energy reserves. Birds constantly balance the trade-offs between speed, distance, and energy efficiency, adjusting altitude, flight mechanics, and even formation flying to optimize performance. These calculations, while largely unconscious, reflect the integration of physiological, environmental, and navigational knowledge that makes such extraordinary feats possible. Migration on a global scale, therefore, is a story of precision and adaptation. Birds combine inherited instincts, social learning, environmental awareness, and sensory sophistication to traverse vast distances with stunning accuracy. By studying extreme migrants, superhighways, irregular routes, and the influence of climatology and geomagnetism, scientists gain insight into the remarkable mechanisms that allow birds to move across continents with elegance and efficiency. It is a journey that challenges assumptions about perception, cognition, and biological engineering, revealing that the scale and patterns of migration are as complex as they are beautiful, and as practical as they are extraordinary. As birds traverse vast landscapes, they rarely rely solely on the invisible cues of the sun, stars, or Earth's magnetic field. Instead, they make extensive use of landmarks, both large and small, to maintain orientation and guide fine-scale adjustments during their journeys. These landmarks can range from towering mountain ranges and expansive rivers to more subtle cues, such as the texture of a forest edge, the shape of a river bend, or even unique patterns in vegetation that stand out against a broader backdrop. Urban environments, too, have become unexpected guides, with birds recognizing patterns of buildings, roads, and other human structures to navigate around or through populated areas. The combination of macro and micro landmarks provides a spatial framework that complements other navigational strategies, offering a form of environmental scaffolding upon which birds can anchor their orientation. The concept of cognitive maps is central to understanding how birds use these landmarks effectively. A cognitive map is an internal mental representation of space, integrating sensory information to allow flexible navigation through complex environments. Birds form these maps by combining visual, olfactory, and tactile cues with memory, creating multidimensional mental representations of the terrain. Research by Carell, Tenkate, and colleagues has demonstrated that pigeons, for example, can remember the relative position of multiple landmarks and adjust their flight path when familiar cues are altered or removed, indicating a sophisticated understanding of spatial relationships rather than simple point-to-point orientation. These mental maps enable birds not only to navigate familiar areas, but also to extrapolate from known locations to novel territories, a skill that is crucial for long-distance migration across unfamiliar landscapes. Cognitive maps are not limited to two-dimensional representations. Birds appear capable of encoding altitude, slope, and other three-dimensional aspects of the environment, allowing them to make complex navigational decisions that consider topography, wind currents, and energy expenditure. Studies using GPS tracking and radar observation have revealed that even small songbirds adjust altitude to exploit thermals and avoid obstacles, reflecting an integration of physical geography into their mental representation of space. The hippocampus, a brain region associated with memory and spatial reasoning, is highly developed in many migratory and food-storing birds, supporting the formation and recall of these intricate maps. Neural imaging and lesion studies have shown that impairments to this region can disrupt a bird's ability to navigate, highlighting the importance of brain architecture in spatial cognition. Landmarks function as more than mere points of reference. They serve as anchors that stabilize orientation, particularly when other cues are ambiguous or unavailable. When magnetic fields fluctuate, when cloud cover obscures the sun or stars, or when olfactory cues are weak, familiar landmarks provide immediate, reliable feedback. They allow birds to correct small deviations from intended paths, reduce cumulative navigational error, and maintain efficiency over long distances. For instance, research on homing pigeons demonstrates that even when displaced hundreds of kilometers from home, birds use prominent topographical features to recalibrate their routes, integrating these visual cues with magnetic orientation and solar navigation. This interplay ensures that multiple systems work together rather than in isolation, providing resilience and redundancy in the migratory strategy. The process of forming cognitive maps also involves learning through experience and observation. Juvenile birds often accompany adults on their first migrations, gradually internalizing the location and significance of key landmarks along the route. Repeated exposure reinforces these maps, and deviations caused by environmental changes such as deforestation or urban development can be incorporated into updated mental representations. Some species exhibit remarkable adaptability, shifting stopover locations or adjusting flight paths in response to new obstacles, demonstrating that cognitive maps are dynamic and continually refined throughout a bird's life. Understanding how birds perceive and encode landmarks also raises questions about sensory integration. Vision provides high-resolution spatial information, but olfaction and mechanoreception contribute additional layers of detail, allowing birds to detect wind patterns, humidity, and even chemical signatures associated with particular locations. The combination of these sensory modalities enhances the richness of the cognitive map and allows birds to navigate in conditions that might seem challenging to human observers. For example, seabirds navigating open oceans may rely on subtle differences in wave patterns or the reflection of sunlight on water surfaces as micro-landmarks, complementing larger-scale magnetic and celestial cues. The use of landmarks naturally leads to interactions with other orientation systems. Solar and stellar cues often provide broad directional guidance, while landmarks offer localized corrections. A bird might orient using the sun's position in the sky during the day, using familiar rivers or mountain ridges to refine its path as it approaches known stopover sites. At night, star patterns can guide long-distance movement, while visible or remembered topographical features help ensure precise arrival at specific breeding or feeding grounds. This combination of overlapping cues allows birds to maintain both large-scale orientation and local accuracy, exemplifying the integration of multiple navigational strategies. Even in challenging conditions, such as dense fog, heavy rain, or disrupted magnetic fields, landmarks provide essential stabilizing reference points. They reduce the cognitive load required for continuous course correction, allowing birds to conserve energy and focus on other survival priorities. Observations from field studies in Europe and North America indicate that birds displaced from familiar routes frequently search for prominent topographical or vegetative cues to reorient themselves, demonstrating that landmarks serve as a primary fallback mechanism when other cues are compromised. Landmarks also influence migratory route design over evolutionary timescales. Populations of birds tend to establish routes that exploit consistent and reliable features, such as mountain passes, coastlines, and river valleys. These stable geographic features create natural corridors that minimize energetic cost and reduce exposure to predators or adverse weather. Over generations, cognitive maps built around these features become increasingly precise, reinforcing the persistence of certain migratory paths, sometimes referred to as avian highways, which guide entire populations along predictable trajectories. In this way, the study of landmarks and cognitive maps illustrates the profound interplay between brain, behavior, and environment. Birds are not passive travelers simply drifting along instinctive paths. They actively interpret, encode, and integrate a wealth of environmental information, creating a dynamic internal representation of the world that supports precise navigation across thousands of kilometers. Landmarks anchor the broader system of solar, stellar, magnetic, and olfactory orientation, providing stability, flexibility, and redundancy that collectively make migration possible. They remind us that navigation is not solely a matter of physics or biology, but of perception, learning, and adaptation working together to allow birds to traverse the globe with elegance and remarkable precision. Birds have long been observed to follow the sun as they migrate, using its apparent movement across the sky to maintain a consistent heading. This ability is not a simple matter of keeping the sun in sight. It involves a sophisticated mechanism known as the time-compensated sun compass. The principle behind this system is that birds can account for the sun's changing position throughout the day, adjusting their orientation based on an internal clock that tracks the time of day. In experiments conducted in the 1970s by Wiltschko and Emlen, European robins were tested in controlled cages with shifting light conditions, revealing that when the perceived time of day was artificially altered, the birds adjusted their orientation in ways predicted by the theory of the time-compensated sun compass. This demonstrated that the bird's directional sense was intrinsically linked to their internal circadian rhythm, allowing them to maintain accurate navigation even as the sun's position shifted over hours of flight. The role of circadian rhythms in solar navigation has been further explored by researchers such as Nathaniel Jarvis, whose work on the circadian modulation of migratory orientation has shown that birds' internal clocks are finely tuned to daily light cycles, and that disruptions to these cycles can temporarily misalign their sun compass. In some cases, birds can recalibrate over several days, gradually restoring correct orientation once the internal clock realigns with the external solar cues. This highlights a remarkable level of flexibility in migratory navigation, as birds are able to integrate timekeeping, visual perception, and spatial memory into a coherent system capable of compensating for both predictable and unexpected changes in the environment. Underlying this ability is an extraordinary diversity of photoreceptors in the avian retina. Birds possess not only the conventional rods and cones used for general vision, but also specialized photoreceptive proteins known as non-visual opsins. These opsins, including melanopsin and cryptochromes, are sensitive to specific wavelengths of light and play, critical roles in both circadian regulation and orientation. Some opsins are thought to detect the polarization patterns of sunlight, which form consistent angles in the sky even when the sun itself is obscured by clouds. Polarized light provides a directional framework that is independent of direct solar visibility, allowing birds to maintain orientation under diffuse or overcast conditions. Studies in European starlings and homing pigeons have demonstrated that disrupting polarization patterns can cause temporary disorientation, indicating that this sensory input is integrated into the sun compass alongside conventional visual cues. Polarized light detection is particularly fascinating because it reveals that birds perceive aspects of the sky invisible to humans. The patterns of light polarization shift predictably with the sun's position, creating a celestial coordinate system encoded in light itself. Birds can use this system to maintain a heading with impressive precision, even when the sun is low on the horizon or behind a veil of clouds. This capability is not static. It is coupled with circadian mechanisms that allow birds to adjust their interpretation of polarization cues according to the time of day. By combining visual input, photoreceptor sensitivity, and internal timekeeping, birds are able to derive directional information from a sky that appears uniform or featureless to human eyes. The integration of solar cues with circadian rhythms is complemented by additional sensory and cognitive mechanisms. Birds continuously assess local landmarks, magnetic signals, and wind patterns, comparing these inputs to their internal models of expected heading. The sun compass does not operate in isolation. It is part of a multi-layered navigational framework that synthesizes diverse information streams. Research by Carol Tainkate and others has shown that birds are capable of dynamically weighting these inputs, giving precedence to the most reliable cues under specific conditions. For example, during overcast days with limited visibility, polarization and magnetic cues may dominate, while on clear days, solar positioning and visual landmarks provide the primary guidance. This flexible integration underscores the sophistication of avian navigation, revealing a system capable of rapid adaptation without losing overall directional accuracy. Experimental studies have also explored how birds respond to unusual solar conditions. In long-distance flights where geographic or atmospheric anomalies alter light availability, birds exhibit recalibration behaviors, adjusting headings to compensate for irregularities. Experiments using artificially shifted light cycles or simulated solar positions have demonstrated that birds can gradually realign their orientation, maintaining accurate migration trajectories even when cues are temporarily misleading. These results suggest a cognitive component in navigation, where experience and feedback are incorporated into the interpretation of solar information, allowing birds to correct deviations and maintain efficiency over long distances. The energy and precision required to employ the sun compass effectively are considerable. Birds must continuously integrate angular information from the sun, account for the passage of time with their internal clock, and adjust for deviations caused by wind, topography, and turbulence. These calculations, though performed instinctively, involve complex sensory processing and memory retrieval, illustrating that the sun compass is both a physiological and cognitive achievement. Observations of migratory species such as the indigo bunting and the European robin reveal that these birds can maintain remarkably straight flight paths over distances of several hundred kilometers, demonstrating the effectiveness of their solar orientation system when coupled with experience and supplemental cues. Beyond navigation, the study of solar and polarized light detection offers insight into broader biological principles. Photoreceptor diversity in birds informs understanding of sensory evolution, showing how specialized adaptations can support behaviors with extreme ecological demands. Circadian modulation provides a window into the temporal organization of behavior, illustrating how internal rhythms coordinate with external cues to optimize performance. Together, these mechanisms highlight the interplay between perception, physiology, and environmental context, reinforcing the notion that bird migration is a product of both biological innovation and ecological necessity. In considering the sun compass, it is also important to acknowledge that birds do not rely solely on solar information for the entirety of their journey. Solar orientation provides broad directional guidance that is refined and reinforced by other navigational tools including geomagnetic perception, landmark recognition, and star-based orientation. This layered approach ensures resilience against temporary disruptions, allowing birds to maintain accuracy even when one or more systems are impaired. The sun compass is therefore both foundational and complementary, offering a continuous reference that interacts seamlessly with other navigational mechanisms to produce the remarkable precision observed in migratory species. Ultimately, the study of solar and polarized light navigation reveals the elegance and complexity of avian migratory behavior. Birds transform the sky into a multidimensional map, integrating light patterns, temporal information, and additional sensory cues into a cohesive orientation system. This system is adaptable, precise, and resilient, reflecting millions of years of evolutionary refinement. By examining how birds perceive the sun, detect polarized light, and integrate these signals with circadian and cognitive mechanisms, we gain insight into a navigational strategy that is both practical and extraordinary, demonstrating the subtle sophistication of one of nature's most enduring mysteries. When the sun dips below the horizon and night blankets the landscape, many migratory birds switch to an entirely different navigational strategy, one that relies not on daylight or landmarks, but on the patterns of the stars above. Nocturnal migration is a remarkable phenomenon, observed in species ranging from tiny warblers and thrushes to larger seabirds that traverse oceans under the cover of darkness. These birds are not merely flying blindly. They use the constellations, the rotation of the night sky, and even the diffuse band of the Milky Way to maintain orientation over hundreds or thousands of kilometers. The stars provide a stable celestial coordinate system, particularly at mid to high latitudes, allowing birds to determine direction independently of ground features that may be obscured by darkness or weather. Research into star-based navigation has revealed the sophistication of this system. Experiments conducted by Mary H. Hine in the 1970s and 80s employed what are now known as star compasses, exposing night migratory birds to controlled star patterns within planetariums. These studies demonstrated that birds imprint on the rotation of the night sky, using the apparent movement of constellations around the North Star as a consistent reference point. Juvenile birds exhibit a remarkable learning process, initially flying in approximate directions guided by instinctual preference, but gradually refining their orientation as they observe the movement of stars over the course of the night. Adults, having previously memorized these celestial cues, display precise directional choices even when certain constellations are removed or rotated, indicating a reliance on a mental map of stellar rotation rather than isolated reference points. The cognitive mechanisms underlying stellar navigation are intertwined with other sensory and temporal systems. Birds must integrate the apparent motion of stars with internal circadian clocks to adjust for seasonal and nightly changes. For instance, as the night progresses, stars appear to rotate due to Earth's rotation, and birds compensate for this motion, maintaining consistent headings despite the dynamic nature of the sky. This is conceptually similar to the time-compensated sun compass observed during daylight migration, highlighting the consistency in navigational principles across different environmental contexts. The ability to integrate temporal information with visual cues allows birds to maintain remarkably straight courses over long distances, even when local landmarks are unavailable. Nocturnal migration also demonstrates the complementarity of stellar and solar cues. While stars dominate guidance at night, the same birds may rely on the sun or polarized light patterns during the day, creating a layered system in which overlapping orientation mechanisms reinforce reliability. If a juvenile bird's solar compass is slightly misaligned, its subsequent experience under a starry sky allows recalibration, ensuring that seasonal migrations remain precise year after year. This redundancy enhances resilience, providing birds with multiple opportunities to verify and correct their heading. Observations of indigo buntings, for example, show that birds trained in both solar and stellar conditions display superior navigational accuracy compared to individuals exposed to only one type of cue, demonstrating the adaptive advantage of multimodal orientation systems. Beyond constellations, the Milky Way itself provides a continuous visual cue for some migratory species. The diffuse light of this galactic band, stretching across the sky, can be used as a directional guide, particularly in areas where bright stars are sparse. Birds appear capable of perceiving orientation relative to the Milky Way, integrating this information with local star patterns and other environmental cues. This is an elegant example of how birds combine multiple scales of celestial information, from individual stars to the overarching structure of the galaxy, to maintain coherent navigation over vast expanses. Juvenile and adult birds differ in their use of stellar cues, illustrating the role of learning in addition to innate preference. Juveniles rely more heavily on instinctual headings, gradually refining their mental representation of star patterns through repeated observation and experience during early migrations. Adults with previously encoded mental maps can navigate under partial or altered star visibility, suggesting that experience enhances flexibility and accuracy. This combination of innate predisposition and experiential learning allows populations to maintain robust migratory patterns even under challenging conditions, such as cloudy nights or light-polluted skies near urban areas. Stellar navigation does not operate in isolation from other environmental information. Birds continuously cross-reference celestial cues with magnetic fields, wind patterns, and olfactory signals to refine orientation. For example, research has shown that when magnetic information is experimentally disrupted, birds may temporarily rely more heavily on star patterns to maintain heading. Similarly, visual recognition of distant landmarks, when visible, can provide fine-scale adjustments to ensure precise arrival at stopover or breeding sites. The integration of these multiple systems illustrates the complexity and adaptability of migratory navigation, allowing birds to traverse continents and oceans with a remarkable combination of instinct, memory, and environmental responsiveness. Experimental studies also highlight the precision of stellar-based navigation. Birds exposed to rotated or altered constellations adjust their headings according to the new visual framework, demonstrating that their mental maps are flexible and capable of recalibration. This ability to adapt to changes in the environment, while maintaining overall migratory direction, underscores the sophistication of the underlying cognitive processes. The observations support the idea that birds are actively interpreting and integrating visual cues rather than simply following rigid, pre-programmed paths. The study of nocturnal migration offers insight into broader principles of spatial cognition and sensory integration. Birds are capable of perceiving subtle angular relationships between stars, tracking rotation patterns, and combining this information with temporal data from internal clocks and feedback from other orientation systems. This multidimensional processing enables reliable navigation even in the absence of visual landmarks, demonstrating the remarkable computational capacity of the avian brain in translating celestial information into practical guidance. Stellar navigation also reinforces the importance of redundancy and reliability in migratory behavior. By maintaining overlapping systems that include solar cues, geomagnetic perception, olfaction, and visual landmarks, birds ensure that temporary disruptions in one domain do not compromise the success of the journey. The interplay between these systems exemplifies evolutionary optimization, where multiple independent cues are integrated to achieve a level of precision and resilience that surpasses what any single system could provide alone. Ultimately, the use of constellations in the Milky Way illustrates the elegance and adaptability of bird migration. Birds transform the night sky into a living map, perceiving patterns and relationships beyond human vision, and integrating these cues with a network of other sensory inputs to navigate with extraordinary accuracy. By studying stellar navigation, we gain a deeper appreciation not only for the capabilities of birds, but also for the intricate, multi-layered strategies that evolution has crafted, enabling these creatures to traverse continents and oceans under the quiet guidance of the stars. Birds navigate across vast distances with an accuracy that often seems almost supernatural, and one of the most remarkable tools in their navigational arsenal is the Earth's magnetic field. This invisible force permeates the planet, providing a consistent global reference that birds can detect and use to maintain orientation over thousands of kilometers. The geomagnetic field can be described through three primary properties: inclination, declination, and intensity. Inclination refers to the angle at which magnetic field lines intersect the surface of the Earth, varying from nearly vertical at the poles to almost horizontal at the equator. Declination is the angular difference between magnetic north and true north, which varies geographically, while intensity measures the strength of the magnetic field, which can range from approximately 25 microteslas near the equator to over 65 microteslas near the poles. These properties collectively create a complex multi-dimensional map that birds can exploit to determine both direction and approximate position. The ability to perceive these magnetic properties, known as magnetoreception, has been a subject of extensive research for decades. Wolfgang Wiltschko and Roswitha Wiltschko in Germany conducted pioneering studies demonstrating that European robins adjust their migratory orientation in response to manipulations of the magnetic field, indicating a sensitive internal compass. Subsequent research by Henrik Moritzen and his team at the University of Oldenburg has expanded this understanding, proposing that radical pair reactions in retinal cryptochromes may allow birds to detect both the direction and inclination of the magnetic field, effectively enabling them to see magnetic information overlaid on the visual landscape. This mechanism offers a remarkable example of how biology can exploit fundamental physical properties to solve practical challenges, integrating chemistry, physics, and neurobiology in a single sensory system. Magnetoreception is particularly critical during long overwater and high-latitude flights, where familiar visual landmarks are scarce or non-existent. Seabirds like albatrosses and petrels travelling thousands of kilometres across the Southern Ocean rely heavily on geomagnetic cues to maintain course, as do migratory songbirds crossing the North Atlantic or Pacific Oceans. These journeys often involve navigating in conditions where celestial cues may be limited due to cloud cover, or where solar orientation is unavailable during overcast or polar regions. Experiments with displaced birds, including studies on pigeons and thrushes, have shown that when visual cues are removed or obstructed, birds can still orient themselves effectively using magnetic information, suggesting that the magnetic compass is both robust and essential for long-distance navigation. While the Earth's magnetic field provides a relatively stable guide, local anomalies and variations introduce complexity into navigational strategies. Magnetic declination and intensity can fluctuate due to geological formations, solar storms, or geomagnetic anomalies, creating areas where the field deviates from its expected patterns. Birds appear capable of detecting these subtle variations, adjusting their flight paths to compensate for unexpected discrepancies. Studies by Moritzen's group using controlled magnetic manipulations in planetarium-like environments have shown that European robins and other species can correct their orientation when presented with simulated local anomalies, indicating a sensitivity not only to general field direction, but also to spatial variation. This capacity allows birds to maintain accuracy even when traversing regions with irregular magnetic signatures, a skill particularly important near tectonic boundaries, volcanic regions, or the geomagnetic equator where variations can be pronounced. The precision of geomagnetic navigation is enhanced by integration with other cues. Birds do not rely exclusively on magnetoreception. Instead, they combine magnetic information with visual landmarks, celestial cues, wind patterns, and olfactory signals. This redundancy provides resilience, allowing a bird to recalibrate its orientation if one system becomes unreliable. For example, a night migratory songbird might use the stars to set a broad heading, while simultaneously cross-referencing the magnetic field to maintain a consistent trajectory during cloud cover. Over long distances, this integration reduces cumulative errors, ensuring that the bird arrives at specific breeding or feeding sites with remarkable accuracy. Field studies have also revealed how birds respond dynamically to magnetic turbulence, such as that caused by solar activity. Sudden changes in geomagnetic intensity can temporarily disorient certain species, leading to short-term deviations from intended courses. However, repeated exposure and experience appear to enable birds to compensate, demonstrating a form of learning or calibration within their magnetic compass. In some cases, juvenile birds exposed to fluctuating magnetic environments during initial migrations develop enhanced sensitivity and flexibility, suggesting that early experience fine-tunes magnetoreception alongside genetic predisposition. The evolutionary significance of magnetoreception is profound. In a world without magnetic cues, many long-distance migratory species would face drastically higher mortality rates, as they would be more likely to become lost, expend excessive energy, or fail to reach critical stopover sites. By providing a global, omnipresent reference, the magnetic compass allows birds to undertake migrations that span hemispheres, cross oceans, and exploit seasonal resources that would otherwise be inaccessible. Species with highly refined magnetic sensitivity, such as the bar-tailed godwit or Arctic tern, can achieve feats of endurance and orientation that are unmatched in the animal kingdom, illustrating how evolution has shaped sensory systems to meet extreme ecological demands. Magnetoreception is not limited to detecting simple direction. Inclination and intensity gradients can provide information about latitude, allowing birds to approximate their position along a north-south axis. This capability functions as a form of geomagnetic map sense, enabling birds to determine not only which direction to fly but also where they are in relation to home, breeding grounds, or stopover sites. Combined with learned information about landmarks, wind patterns, and celestial cues, this map-like function allows birds to navigate with a level of precision that rivals the most sophisticated human instruments. Experimental approaches continue to reveal the subtlety and complexity of this system. In controlled studies, altering magnetic inclination by a few degrees or changing intensity by small increments can induce measurable shifts in orientation behavior. These observations indicate that birds can detect variations on the order of less than 1 microtesla, an astonishing sensitivity given the relatively weak strength of the geomagnetic field. Such precision supports both directional navigation and positional awareness, allowing birds to maintain long-distance courses even under conditions that would challenge other animals. The integration of magnetic cues with other sensory inputs also demonstrates the adaptive flexibility of birds. During migration, birds constantly compare expected magnetic information with environmental feedback, including visual cues, celestial orientation, and local geographic features. This multimodal approach not only enhances accuracy, but also enables birds to compensate for transient disruptions, whether caused by geomagnetic storms, weather events, or unexpected obstacles. Redundancy in navigation ensures that no single cue dominates entirely, creating a resilient system that supports survival over extended journeys. Magnetoreception also interacts with neurophysiological and biochemical systems. Radical pair reactions in retinal cryptochromes are thought to convert magnetic information into neural signals, which are then processed by specialized brain regions involved in spatial orientation. This mechanism suggests that magnetic perception is not merely passive detection, but an active integration of environmental input into cognitive maps, linking the sensory experience directly to navigational decision-making. The capacity to interpret these signals accurately under varying conditions is a testament to both the sensory and cognitive sophistication of migratory birds. In addition to supporting daily migration, magnetoreception plays a crucial role in the evolutionary success of species. Birds capable of detecting and responding to geomagnetic cues are able to exploit distant feeding grounds, colonize new habitats, and avoid predation more effectively by minimizing energy expenditure and travel time. Species that navigate with precision benefit from increased reproductive success, access to abundant resources, and the ability to adjust to changing climatic or environmental conditions. Over evolutionary timescales, this has likely reinforced the development of sensitive magnetic detection systems, shaping migratory strategies that span continents and oceans. Ultimately, the study of geomagnetic navigation reveals how birds can perceive invisible forces and transform them into practical guidance over extraordinary distances. By detecting inclination, declination, and intensity, compensating for local anomalies, and integrating this information with solar, stellar, and landmark cues, birds maintain remarkable navigational accuracy under conditions that would confound even the most advanced human instruments. This system exemplifies the elegance and complexity of evolution, demonstrating that migration is not simply a journey through space, but a dynamic interaction between physiology, cognition, and the invisible forces that govern our planet. The magnetic compass provides a foundation for orientation, a framework for map-like perception, and a resilient guide that, in concert with other cues, enables birds to traverse the globe with extraordinary skill and reliability. One of the most fascinating and cutting-edge explanations for avian magnetoreception lies in the realm of quantum biology, a field that bridges the worlds of physics and life sciences. The radical pair hypothesis proposes that certain chemical reactions within a bird's retina are influenced by Earth's magnetic field, providing directional information at the level of molecular spins. At the heart of this mechanism are cryptochromes, light-sensitive proteins found in the retinas of many birds, which can form pairs of electrons whose spin states are correlated, or entangled, in ways that respond to magnetic fields. These reactions create a biochemical signal that the bird's nervous system can interpret, effectively converting an invisible force into sensory information that informs orientation and navigation. The concept of radical pair magnetoreception was first theoretically explored by Klaus Schulten in the 1970s and 80s, who proposed that spin-correlated electron pairs could function as sensitive detectors of weak magnetic fields. Building on this, Michael Ritz and colleagues conducted experiments with European robins in the 1990s, demonstrating that disruption of light conditions, particularly in the blue spectrum, could impair magnetic orientation. This suggested that the radical pair reactions were not only light-dependent, but also finely tuned to specific wavelengths, providing a fascinating intersection between photoreception and geomagnetic detection. Henrik Moritzon's ongoing research at the University of Oldenburg has expanded these findings, exploring how cryptochrome molecules in the retina might allow birds to visualize magnetic information as patterns superimposed on their normal field of vision, creating what could be thought of as a magnetic overlay that aids orientation. The potential role of quantum entanglement in these processes is particularly remarkable. When electrons form a radical pair, their spins become correlated in a way that allows them to respond coherently to external magnetic fields. This coherence can be maintained for fractions of a second, long enough to influence the outcome of the chemical reaction. In effect, the bird's retina may be performing a quantum measurement, detecting minute differences in magnetic orientation at scales far smaller than conventional sensory systems would allow. This idea challenges traditional notions of biological sensing, suggesting that living organisms can exploit phenomena usually associated with physics laboratories, including superposition and entanglement, to solve real-world navigational problems. Experimental work has tested the sensitivity of birds to different light conditions, revealing that blue light, around 440 nanometers, is particularly effective in supporting magnetoreception, while green light, around 530 nanometers, can partially modulate the effect. These studies suggest that the radical pair reactions in cryptochromes require specific energy inputs to initiate and maintain coherence, linking environmental light conditions directly to the bird's ability to navigate using magnetic cues. Experiments conducted under controlled laboratory conditions have shown that when the spectral composition of light is altered, orientation can be disrupted, indicating that magnetoreception is not only quantum in nature, but also highly dependent on photic context. The integration of quantum sensing with classical magnetic perception illustrates the sophistication of avian navigation. Birds are not simply reading a compass passively. They're actively converting electromagnetic forces into sensory signals, interpreting these signals in combination with visual landmarks, celestial cues, and olfactory input. This multimodal system enhances reliability and allows birds to compensate for environmental noise such as geomagnetic turbulence or overcast skies, ensuring that orientation remains accurate over long distances. It is a vivid example of redundancy in biological systems, where multiple sensory pathways converge to produce robust behavior. Radical pair magnetoreception also emphasizes the importance of evolutionary adaptation. The ability to perceive Earth's magnetic field through quantum-sensitive chemical reactions likely confers a significant advantage, enabling birds to navigate across vast oceans and unfamiliar terrain with minimal error. Over millions of years, natural selection has refined these proteins and associated neural pathways, optimizing sensitivity and coherence times for practical use in navigation. This suggests that what appears to be an abstract or esoteric quantum process has direct ecological relevance, influencing survival, migration success, and reproductive outcomes. The neurological basis for interpreting these quantum signals is an area of active investigation. While cryptochromes provide the initial magnetic information, it must be processed by specialized brain regions to influence behavior. Studies indicate that visual processing centers, particularly in the forebrain, may integrate the magnetic overlay with other sensory inputs, such as landmarks or celestial cues, producing a coherent map of orientation that guides flight paths. In effect, birds are performing continuous computations that incorporate quantum-level input into real-time decision-making during migration, translating a microscopic physical phenomenon into macroscopic behavioral outcomes. Researchers have also explored the potential limitations and boundaries of this system. Radical pair reactions are sensitive to temperature, chemical environment, and the presence of competing light wavelengths, meaning that magnetoreception may be more effective under certain environmental conditions. Birds appear to compensate for these factors through behavioral strategies, such as selecting specific times of night for migration, orienting flight paths to maximize the angle of light incidence, or integrating other orientation cues when the quantum mechanism is less reliable. These adaptive behaviors highlight the interplay between biochemical mechanisms and ecological pressures, illustrating the co-evolution of physiology and environment. In addition to providing direction, the radical pair mechanism may contribute to a map-like sense of position. By detecting variations in magnetic intensity or inclination, birds could potentially use this information to estimate latitude or relative location within a magnetic gradient. Combined with experience, memory, and additional sensory information, this allows for both coarse and fine-scale navigation over continental and oceanic distances. The quantum nature of the signal enhances sensitivity, potentially allowing birds to detect magnetic changes that are far below what human instruments can easily measure, providing a uniquely precise method for global orientation. The radical pair hypothesis also opens new avenues for interdisciplinary research. By studying how birds exploit quantum phenomena for navigation, scientists gain insight into how living systems can harness principles traditionally thought to be confined to physics laboratories. It suggests that quantum biology may play a broader role in sensory systems and behavior than previously appreciated, potentially influencing areas as diverse as human health, biomimetic engineering, and the design of navigation technologies inspired by nature. The work of Schulten, Ritz, and Moritzen underscores the importance of bridging biology and physics to understand natural phenomena that appear, at first glance, to defy conventional explanation. Behavioral experiments continue to reveal the subtlety and adaptability of quantum magnetoreception. Birds exposed to oscillating magnetic fields, rotated or reversed field vectors, or filtered light of different wavelengths adjust their orientation in ways that reflect both quantum sensitivity and higher-level cognitive integration. Juvenile birds exhibit learning and calibration of these cues over early migrations, while adults rely on stored experience to maintain precise headings. This combination of innate mechanism and adaptive learning ensures that magnetoreception remains reliable across a variety of environmental conditions, further demonstrating the sophistication and resilience of the system. In considering quantum magnetoreception, it becomes clear that birds navigate not only through space, but through a complex interplay of forces that extend from the macroscopic to the quantum level. They perceive the magnetic field, process it through biochemical and neural pathways, and integrate it with celestial, solar, and terrestrial cues to maintain precise, efficient, and adaptive migration routes. This capability exemplifies the elegance of evolutionary solutions to ecological challenges, showing that living organisms can exploit the deepest principles of physics to achieve survival in a complex and variable world. Ultimately, radical pair magnetoreception represents one of the most extraordinary frontiers in modern biology. It demonstrates that a bird's retina can function as both a quantum sensor and a neural interface, converting the invisible geomagnetic field into actionable guidance. By combining cryptochrome-based quantum sensitivity with learned behavior, circadian modulation, and integration with other sensory modalities, birds navigate across continents and oceans with precision that continues to inspire and challenge scientists. The study of this system not only deepens our understanding of migration, but also expands the boundaries of what we consider possible in the interaction between biology and physics, revealing a world in which the most subtle forces of nature are harnessed in service of life. In addition to visual and magnetic guidance, birds also rely on their sense of smell, a surprising but increasingly well-documented navigational tool. Olfactory navigation, first systematically studied by Lawrence Hagstrom in the 1970s and 80s, revealed that homing pigeons and other species use airborne chemical cues to orient themselves over long distances. By altering or masking olfactory inputs, researchers observed measurable disorientation, demonstrating that odors carried on the wind provide directional information, particularly when other sensory cues are limited or ambiguous. Subsequent studies by Per Olsen and his team have explored atmospheric chemical mapping, showing that birds can detect gradients of volatile compounds in the environment, effectively creating a mental representation of scent across space, sometimes referred to as an olfactory map. These maps allow birds to determine not only relative direction, but also location within familiar and even unfamiliar landscapes, complementing magnetic and celestial cues. Olfactory maps function as a flexible and adaptive system. Birds encode chemical information from multiple sources, including vegetation, soil, ocean emissions, and urban environments, into a mental framework that provides spatial reference. During migration, these cues can be especially valuable over regions where landmarks are scarce, such as open oceans, deserts, or large expanses of agricultural land. By detecting variations in odor composition carried by prevailing winds, birds can refine their heading, detect changes in environmental conditions, and even identify specific stopover sites or feeding grounds. This sensory input operates alongside visual, magnetic, and celestial mechanisms, forming a multi-layered orientation system that enhances resilience and precision. The effectiveness of olfactory navigation depends on both the stability of atmospheric conditions and the sensitivity of the bird's olfactory system. Birds such as pigeons and petrels possess highly developed olfactory bulbs, which process chemical information from the air with remarkable acuity. Hagstrom's experiments demonstrated that removing or blocking these receptors impaired navigational performance, while exposure to familiar odor cues restored accurate orientation. Similarly, Olsen's work has shown that birds can detect subtle chemical gradients over distances of tens to hundreds of kilometers, allowing them to adjust course in response to both natural and anthropogenic environmental features. Environmental changes can significantly impact olfactory cues, adding complexity to navigation. Seasonal variations in vegetation, temperature, and humidity influence the concentration and dispersion of airborne compounds, while human activities such as agriculture, industry, and urbanization can alter or mask chemical signals. Birds must therefore continuously recalibrate their olfactory maps to maintain accuracy, integrating these cues with complementary systems such as magnetic orientation, celestial navigation, and visual landmarks. This dynamic integration illustrates the adaptability of migratory behavior, allowing birds to respond to both predictable seasonal changes and unexpected environmental disturbances. Olfactory information is particularly important in situations where other cues are unreliable. On overcast nights when stars are obscured, or during periods of geomagnetic anomalies, scent cues can provide directional guidance that maintains consistency in flight paths. In this context, olfactory maps act as both a primary orientation tool and a redundancy system, offering an alternative source of information that enhances reliability. Research on homing pigeons has shown that when visual and magnetic cues are experimentally disrupted, birds often rely heavily on olfactory gradients to navigate home, underscoring the role of smell in complex real-world navigation scenarios. The combination of olfactory and atmospheric cues also illustrates the multi-scale nature of avian navigation. Birds integrate fine-scale chemical information, such as odors associated with specific plant species, with broad-scale gradients that provide regional or continental context. This allows for precise adjustments in heading during local flights, while maintaining general orientation across larger distances. For seabirds like petrels and albatrosses, which travel thousands of kilometers over featureless ocean, Detection of chemical plumes from phytoplankton blooms, coastal vegetation, or even ocean currents may provide critical orientation cues that are otherwise unavailable through vision or magnetoreception alone. Olfactory navigation requires the integration of sensory perception, memory, and environmental knowledge. Birds must recognize familiar odors, recall their spatial associations, and interpret chemical gradients in real time, often under rapidly changing atmospheric conditions. This process is cognitively demanding, demonstrating that olfaction in birds is not a simple reflexive response, but a sophisticated system that interacts with other sensory modalities. The flexibility of olfactory maps allows birds to compensate for incomplete information, errors, or unexpected environmental changes, supporting a high degree of reliability in migratory journeys. The study of olfactory cues also highlights the importance of interdisciplinary research. By combining field observations, controlled laboratory experiments, and atmospheric chemistry, scientists such as Hagstrom and Olsen have uncovered a sensory modality that was long underestimated in its navigational significance. These findings expand our understanding of how birds perceive and interpret their environment, showing that migration relies on a complex interplay of multiple sensory channels rather than a single dominant system. The integration of olfactory information with solar, stellar, and magnetic cues illustrates the redundancy and robustness of avian navigation, ensuring that birds can traverse diverse landscapes and unpredictable weather with confidence. Olfactory navigation also demonstrates the subtlety with which birds interact with their environment. Even faint or transient chemical signals can provide meaningful information when interpreted within a larger framework of sensory input. This highlights the sophistication of migratory behavior, in which multiple cues are continuously assessed, compared, and weighted to optimize orientation. The flexibility afforded by olfactory maps allows birds to maintain efficiency and accuracy, even under challenging conditions, reinforcing the importance of multimodal navigation in ensuring successful long-distance migration. In essence, the use of olfactory and atmospheric cues reveals that bird navigation is not merely a visual or magnetic endeavor, but a holistic integration of sensory information across multiple scales. By detecting, memorizing, and interpreting chemical gradients, birds construct internal representations of their environment that enhance spatial awareness and directional accuracy. These olfactory maps provide both primary guidance in uncertain conditions and supplemental information that reinforces solar, stellar, and magnetic orientation. Together, these systems form a resilient and adaptable network, enabling birds to traverse vast distances, locate critical resources, and maintain the precision of their migratory journeys across an ever-changing world. Migration is often imagined as a solitary endeavor, a lone bird crossing oceans, deserts, or continents, guided by instinct and environmental cues. Yet for many species, the reality is far more social. Birds frequently travel in flocks, and within these groups, knowledge about routes, stopover sites, and optimal timing can be transmitted across generations, creating what researchers describe as migratory cultures. These cultures are not taught in the human sense, but learned through observation, imitation, and shared experience. Juvenile birds often accompany adults on their first migrations, acquiring information that is crucial for survival and efficiency. Over time, this social learning ensures that populations maintain consistent migratory pathways, even when environmental conditions change. The work of Thomas Müller on white storks illustrates the power of social transmission in migration. Müller's research involved tracking storks with GPS devices to monitor their routes across Europe and into Africa. The studies revealed that young storks following experienced adults were more accurate in timing departures, selecting stopover sites, and maintaining directional consistency. In contrast, juveniles migrating alone often displayed greater variability in route choice and timing, sometimes extending journeys or deviating from optimal paths. These observations highlight the importance of leadership within migratory groups and demonstrate that knowledge transfer between generations enhances navigational success, reducing the risk of energy depletion or predation during long-distance travel. Leader-follower dynamics are further exemplified in V-formation flight, a strategy employed by many large migratory birds, including geese, cranes, and storks. Flying in this configuration reduces aerodynamic drag for trailing birds, allowing them to conserve energy by up to 20% compared to solitary flight. the leading bird encounters the greatest resistance, and positions are rotated to distribute effort across the flock. These formations require precise coordination and continual communication, illustrating that collective navigation is not simply a social convenience, but a biomechanical advantage that directly influences the efficiency of migration. Birds must adjust spacing, wingbeat timing, and relative position dynamically, demonstrating both individual skill and group-level coordination. The cognitive ecology of group navigation has been explored extensively by Tim Guilford and colleagues, who have investigated how individual birds within a flock make decisions that affect the collective route. Flocks appear to combine inputs from multiple birds, weighting the orientation, experience, and reliability of each member to determine the overall trajectory. This collective decision-making allows groups to navigate with greater accuracy than individuals alone, particularly when environmental cues are uncertain or conflicting. Experiments with homing pigeons have shown that larger flocks often reach destinations more efficiently, suggesting that social integration can compensate for individual errors, highlighting an emergent intelligence arising from group behavior. Social learning and collective navigation also interact with innate migratory instincts. Birds are born with directional tendencies encoded in their genes, guiding them toward breeding or wintering grounds. These instincts provide a framework upon which experience and social information can build. For example, a juvenile bird may instinctively orient southward in autumn, but accompanying an adult provides information about specific routes, safe resting points, and the timing of departures to exploit prevailing winds. The synergy between innate behavior and socially transmitted knowledge allows populations to navigate efficiently while maintaining flexibility, adapting to changes in climate, habitat, or resource availability. Multi-generational transmission of migratory information is particularly important in long-lived species with complex routes. Over decades, groups of storks, cranes, and geese establish consistent pathways that persist even when individual birds are replaced through natural turnover. These pathways function as cultural memory, preserving efficient and safe migration strategies that have been refined over generations. Field studies have documented that disruptions to these social networks, such as the removal of experienced adults or habitat destruction along key routes, can lead to confusion and increased mortality among juveniles, emphasizing the critical role of social structure in maintaining migratory success. Flocks also serve as sensory amplifiers. In a group, birds can share information about environmental conditions, such as wind direction, obstacles, or thermals, allowing individuals to adjust their behavior based on collective input. This distributed processing of information enhances navigation under challenging conditions, particularly when relying on variable cues such as magnetic anomalies or overcast skies. In essence, the group functions as a distributed cognitive network, with multiple birds contributing to the assessment of direction, distance, and environmental factors, ensuring a more robust migratory outcome. Even within these social frameworks, individual learning remains important. Birds observe patterns of others, memorizing routes and refining timing while also evaluating the reliability of specific leaders. Over time, this experience allows individuals to migrate independently when necessary, carrying forward acquired knowledge to new contexts or unfamiliar landscapes. The integration of social learning with individual cognition illustrates the remarkable adaptability of migratory species, allowing them to thrive across continents and across generations. Social learning also interacts with other sensory systems. Visual recognition of landmarks, solar and stellar cues, magnetic orientation, and olfactory maps can all be reinforced through collective experience. For instance, a juvenile bird navigating by the sun or the stars can cross-check directional information by observing the headings of more experienced flock members, calibrating internal compasses against real-world performance. This multi-layered approach enhances both reliability and resilience, ensuring that even when one sensory system is temporarily compromised, birds maintain effective navigation. Migration, therefore, is not merely a journey of instinct or individual cognition, but a deeply social phenomenon. Birds leverage the knowledge and experience of others, transmit cultural information across generations, and integrate social cues with sensory perception to optimize orientation. The study of migratory cultures, leader-follower dynamics, and collective decision-making reveals that efficiency and precision are emergent properties of social systems, illustrating how evolution has shaped not only physiological and cognitive mechanisms but also the social structures that enable successful migration. In observing these patterns, it becomes clear that migration is both a personal and collective endeavour. Birds are equipped with innate directionality, yet their journeys are refined and stabilised by the presence of experienced companions. By flying together, they conserve energy, share environmental information, and transmit knowledge across generations, creating a network of cultural memory that ensures continuity and resilience. The synergy between instinct, experience, and social transmission transforms what could be a perilous solo journey into a coordinated, adaptive, and remarkably efficient passage across continents, exemplifying the sophistication of avian navigation in both individual and group contexts. The ability of birds to navigate across vast distances relies not only on sensory input, but also on a remarkable neural architecture that processes, stores, and integrates this information into actionable behaviour. Central to this system is the hippocampus, a region of the brain associated with spatial memory and orientation. Comparative studies between migratory and non-migratory species reveal striking differences in hippocampal structure and function. Migratory birds, such as the white-crowned sparrow or the garden warbler, exhibit an enlarged hippocampus relative to their body size compared to non-migratory relatives, suggesting that the demands of a long-distance navigation drive the development of enhanced spatial processing capabilities. This enlargement correlates with both increased neuron density and greater connectivity to other sensory and motor regions, providing a neural substrate capable of handling the complex computations required for migration. The concept of spatial representation in the avian brain can be further understood through the lens of grid cell analogues, a discovery first established in mammals by Edvard Moser and his team in Norway. Grid cells provide a coordinate system for spatial navigation, firing at regular intervals as an animal moves through its environment. Birds appear to possess similar neural mechanisms, enabling them to map and recall spatial relationships over both familiar and unfamiliar landscapes. These grid cell-like structures allow for continuous updating of positional information, integrating cues from vision, magnetoreception, olfaction, and celestial orientation. By encoding locations, distances, and angles in a neural framework, birds are able to navigate with both precision and flexibility, responding to environmental variability without losing overall orientation. Neural plasticity is a key factor in the effectiveness of these systems. The avian hippocampus is highly adaptable, exhibiting growth and synaptic remodeling in response to navigational experience. Juvenile birds, for example, show progressive development of spatial circuitry as they undertake their first migrations, learning to integrate landmark recognition, magnetic cues, and wind patterns into a coherent internal representation. Similarly, adults demonstrate continued plasticity, allowing for recalibration when encountering altered environments or changes in migratory pathways. This neural flexibility ensures that even species with long, intercontinental migrations can adjust to dynamic landscapes and maintain efficiency across repeated journeys. The integration of sensory input into a coherent navigational framework has led researchers to propose the idea of a neurological map overlay, a hypothetical system in which magnetic information, visual landmarks, and celestial cues are projected onto a cognitive map within the brain. This concept suggests that magnetoreceptive input is not merely a directional compass, but is integrated into spatial memory networks, allowing birds to align environmental cues with stored representations of known routes. Functional studies in homing pigeons and migratory songbirds indicate that disrupting specific hippocampal pathways impairs the ability to utilize these integrated cues, further supporting the notion that navigation depends on the interplay between specialized sensory receptors and higher-level spatial processing. Birds also exhibit sophisticated mechanisms for multimodal integration. Inputs from magnetic receptors, visual cues, olfactory gradients, and celestial information converge in the brain, allowing the animal to weigh the reliability of each cue based on context. For example, when cloud cover obscures the sun or stars, the brain may prioritize geomagnetic or olfactory information to maintain a correct heading. Conversely, when entering familiar territory, visual landmarks may dominate decision-making, providing fine-scale corrections to previously calculated routes. Neural recordings and behavioral experiments demonstrate that these systems operate in concert, dynamically adjusting weighting based on sensory certainty, environmental stability, and the bird's prior experience. The cognitive demands of such integration are considerable. Birds must continuously monitor environmental conditions, interpret sensory signals, and predict optimal routes, all while maintaining energetic efficiency and responding to immediate challenges such as wind turbulence or predator presence. Neural circuits in the hippocampus and connected regions process this information in real time, updating spatial maps and guiding motor outputs to adjust flight paths seamlessly. Experiments with displaced birds indicate that the hippocampus is particularly crucial for recalibrating orientation when familiar landmarks are unavailable, highlighting the brain's role in maintaining both long-term memory and short-term adaptive navigation. Memory consolidation is another critical component. Migratory birds must retain knowledge of routes across seasons, recalling the positions of stopover sites, feeding grounds, and optimal flight corridors. Neural imaging and behavioral studies show that repeated exposure to migratory routes strengthens hippocampal connectivity, enhancing both the precision and reliability of spatial recall. This process allows birds to undertake migrations with minimal error accumulation, ensuring that small deviations do not compound into significant navigational mistakes over thousands of kilometers. Interestingly, neural systems supporting migration are also sensitive to social information. Flocks often include both experienced and juvenile birds, and the hippocampus may play a role in integrating observational learning with innate directional tendencies. Juveniles learn to recognize landmarks, adjust for wind patterns, and anticipate the sequence of stopover sites by observing older birds. This social learning is encoded within spatial memory networks, creating an intersection between cognitive processing, environmental awareness, and socially transmitted knowledge. The result is a navigation system that is both individual and collective, capable of adapting to dynamic conditions while preserving population-level route fidelity. Neurological studies also suggest that birds possess specialized mechanisms for error detection and course correction. When discrepancies arise between expected and observed sensory input, such as encountering a geomagnetic anomaly or a blocked visual landmark, the hippocampus evaluates the mismatch and triggers compensatory adjustments. These adjustments may involve recalibrating heading, altering flight altitude, or modifying reliance on different sensory modalities. This capacity for continuous feedback and correction highlights the precision of avian navigation, demonstrating that the brain actively integrates uncertainty into decision-making rather than relying on rigid, pre-programmed responses. The interplay between environmental cues and neural processing is further exemplified by experiments manipulating multiple variables simultaneously. Birds exposed to altered magnetic fields, filtered light conditions, or displaced olfactory inputs must reconcile conflicting information within their cognitive maps. Successful navigation under these conditions requires a robust and adaptable neural network capable of weighting inputs, identifying reliable cues, and updating spatial representations on the fly. Such studies provide insight into the mechanisms by which the hippocampus and associated brain regions support flexible, multimodal navigation, demonstrating that spatial memory is both dynamic and highly responsive to context. Theoretical models of hippocampal function suggest that birds maintain a layered representation of space, in which coarse-scale information such as magnetic orientation provides general headings, while fine-scale information from landmarks, celestial cues, and olfactory gradients allows precise adjustments. This layered approach enables birds to navigate efficiently across diverse terrains, including open oceans, dense forests, and urban landscapes, while minimizing energy expenditure and maintaining course accuracy. The neural architecture required to support such processing is complex, involving parallel circuits, feedback loops, and adaptive weighting of sensory input, highlighting the sophistication of the avian brain. Finally, understanding the neural basis of navigation provides insight into the integration of evolution, physiology, and behavior. Migratory birds have evolved hippocampal structures and connectivity patterns that support long-distance navigation, spatial memory, and multimodal sensory integration. Neural plasticity ensures that individuals can adapt to changing environments, recalibrate routes, and learn from both experience and social context. The combination of innate architecture and adaptive learning enables birds to traverse thousands of kilometers with extraordinary precision, demonstrating that the brain itself is a critical instrument of migration, In some, the hippocampus and related neural systems provide the foundation for avian navigation, encoding spatial maps, integrating multimodal sensory input, supporting social learning, and facilitating dynamic error correction. The interaction between neural circuits, environmental perception, and behavioral output creates a cohesive system capable of guiding birds over continents, oceans, and varying landscapes with remarkable accuracy. The study of these mechanisms reveals not only the elegance of evolutionary adaptation, but also the intricate cognitive and neural processes that underlie one of nature's most extraordinary feats. Long-distance flight presents birds with a continual challenge: how to traverse thousands of kilometers efficiently while conserving energy and responding to dynamic environmental conditions. One of the key factors in this challenge is the interaction with the atmosphere itself. Wind currents, thermal updrafts, and jet streams all influence flight paths, offering opportunities to reduce energy expenditure or, conversely, obstacles that must be managed carefully. Birds are remarkably adept at exploiting these environmental features, adjusting altitude, speed, and trajectory to optimize efficiency. Daniel Weimerskirch and his colleagues at the Centre National de la Recherche Scientifique have conducted extensive studies on albatrosses, demonstrating that these seabirds exploit wind shear and dynamic soaring to cover enormous distances across the Southern Ocean with minimal flapping, sometimes travelling hundreds of kilometres in a single day without significant energy expenditure. Dynamic soaring is a particularly elegant adaptation, allowing birds to convert vertical wind gradients into forward motion. By repeatedly climbing into faster-moving air and descending into slower layers, albatrosses can gain energy from the wind itself, reducing reliance on muscular flapping and conserving fat stores that are critical for survival during extended journeys. Thermal updrafts, formed when sunlight warms the land unevenly, provide similar advantages for terrestrial and coastal species. Birds such as raptors and storks climb in rising columns of warm air, gaining altitude without energy-intensive flapping, before gliding along to the next thermal or toward their destination. Understanding these environmental features is essential, not only for appreciating the physics of flight, but also for recognizing the intelligence and adaptability required to integrate them into navigational decision-making. The mechanics of flight are closely linked to these environmental interactions. Flapping provides thrust and lift, essential for maneuvering and maintaining speed in variable conditions. Gliding allows birds to conserve energy while covering distance efficiently, particularly when aided by winds or thermals. Formation flying, such as V-shaped arrangements seen in geese and pelicans, offers additional aerodynamic benefits. The lead bird reduces air resistance for those following, creating a cascade of energy savings for the flock. Rotating leadership positions allows each bird to share the burden of the most energetically demanding position, ensuring equitable distribution of effort and minimizing fatigue across the group. These mechanical adaptations are tightly coupled with environmental awareness, illustrating that flight is not simply a matter of muscle and wing shape, but a complex interplay between physiology, physics, and ecology. Birds continuously integrate environmental information into navigational decisions. Atmospheric conditions, including wind direction, speed, and turbulence, are assessed and factored into route planning, often in real time. For example, migrating white storks and spoonbills adjust departure times to coincide with favourable thermals, allowing them to gain altitude efficiently before embarking on long flights. Similarly, seabirds monitor surface wind patterns and oceanic wave conditions, selecting altitudes and headings that maximize energy efficiency. This integration of environmental data allows birds to maintain consistent progress while minimizing risk, demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of their physical context and an ability to adjust behavior to exploit available resources. Weather conditions further influence decision-making, requiring birds to balance speed, safety, and energy expenditure. Storms, high winds, or precipitation may necessitate temporary detours, changes in altitude, or even pauses at stopover sites. Birds exhibit remarkable flexibility in these circumstances, often delaying departure until conditions improve or altering routes to take advantage of local wind patterns. Observational studies of migrating raptors in Europe, for instance, show that birds regularly adjust their paths to exploit tailwinds, even when this involves temporarily increasing distance travelled in order to conserve energy overall. These adaptive strategies demonstrate that flight is not only a physical activity, but also a behavioral and cognitive challenge, requiring continuous assessment of risk and reward. The efficiency of long-distance flight is further enhanced by the interaction of wing morphology with environmental conditions. Birds with long, narrow wings, such as albatrosses or frigate birds, are optimized for gliding and soaring over open water, whereas species with shorter, broader wings, like sparrows and finches, are adapted for maneuverability in forested or complex terrestrial landscapes. Wing loading, the ratio of body mass to wing area, influences how effectively a bird can exploit thermals, gusts, and updrafts. Birds adjust wing beat frequency, amplitude, and angle to optimize lift and thrust in response to these variables, demonstrating a continuous feedback loop between environmental perception and biomechanical execution. Formation flight also exemplifies the integration of environmental awareness with social and mechanical adaptation. The V-formation not only reduces drag, but also allows birds to maintain visual contact with companions, coordinate directional changes, and share information about atmospheric conditions. This collective awareness enhances navigation, particularly when individual birds encounter unexpected obstacles or variable winds. Field studies indicate that flocks adjust formation geometry based on wind strength, flock size, and individual fatigue, illustrating a dynamic optimization process that balances energy conservation with navigational accuracy and social cohesion. Energy management is a critical aspect of survival during long migrations. Birds must store sufficient fat reserves, calculate the energetic cost of flapping versus gliding, and decide when to exploit environmental features such as thermals or wind corridors. Decisions regarding altitude, heading, and speed are informed by both immediate sensory input and learned experience from prior migrations. Daniel Amos-Kirch's work on albatrosses revealed that these birds can optimize flight paths over the open ocean by selecting routes that take advantage of prevailing winds and wave patterns, minimizing energy expenditure while maximizing distance covered. This combination of behavioral strategy and physical adaptation exemplifies the integration of cognition, physiology, and environmental awareness. Thermal and wind conditions also influence stopover behavior. Birds strategically select resting and feeding locations to coincide with favorable atmospheric conditions, allowing them to resume flights with renewed energy and optimal positioning relative to prevailing winds. In some cases, birds undertake longer flights than strictly necessary to reach regions where thermal activity or wind currents will enhance efficiency, illustrating a sophisticated understanding of energetic trade-offs. These decisions, though largely instinctive, reflect a deep evolutionary tuning of behavior to environmental patterns. The study of environmental adaptation and flight mechanics underscores the complexity of migration as both a physiological and cognitive endeavor. Birds continuously integrate sensory input, environmental cues, aerodynamic principles, and energetic constraints to navigate efficiently across diverse and often challenging landscapes. The interplay of gliding, flapping, thermal exploitation, wind assessment, and social coordination creates a system in which physics, biology, and behavior converge seamlessly. Ultimately, the interaction between environmental conditions and flight mechanics allows birds to optimize survival and route efficiency over vast distances. By exploiting wind currents, thermal updrafts, and jet streams, adjusting wing behavior to suit immediate conditions, and coordinating with flock members when appropriate, birds conserve energy, reduce fatigue, and maintain precision in navigation. This integration of environmental adaptation and mechanical efficiency exemplifies the remarkable ingenuity of avian migration, demonstrating how finely tuned biological systems respond to the dynamic forces of the natural world to achieve extraordinary feats of endurance and precision. Birds are not only guided by external cues such as the sun, stars, and magnetic fields, but also by internal timekeeping mechanisms that regulate the timing of their migrations with astonishing precision. Circadian rhythms, the approximately 24-hour cycles that govern physiological and behavioral processes, provide the foundation for daily timing, while seasonal or circannual rhythms synchronize long-distance migrations with changing environmental conditions. These internal clocks ensure that departure, flight duration, stopover intervals, and arrival at breeding or wintering grounds are coordinated with optimal resource availability and climatic conditions, allowing birds to maximize survival and reproductive success. Photoperiod, the length of daylight within a 24-hour period, serves as a primary cue for seasonal timing. Alexander Liebscher and his research team have explored how photoperiodic entrainment influences migratory behavior, demonstrating that birds respond to subtle changes in daylight duration to initiate physiological and behavioral preparations for migration. Changes in photoperiod trigger hormonal adjustments, fat accumulation, and shifts in activity patterns, effectively priming the bird for the energetic demands of long-distance travel. These adjustments also synchronize with environmental factors such as temperature, precipitation, and food availability, ensuring that the timing of migration aligns with favorable conditions along the migratory route. Molecular clocks within the avian brain and peripheral tissues provide the mechanism for circadian and seasonal regulation. Proteins such as clock, BMAL1, and various cryptochromes interact in transcriptional and translational feedback loops, generating rhythmic oscillations that persist even in the absence of external light cues. These molecular cycles are intimately linked to migratory navigation, as they modulate sensitivity to solar position, magnetic fields, and polarized light. The interaction between molecular clocks and magnetoreception in particular allows birds to adjust orientation based on both time of day and geomagnetic input, integrating internal timing with environmental information to maintain consistent headings over long distances. Circadian rhythms also play a crucial role in the daily timing of migratory activity. Many nocturnal migrants, such as warblers and thrushes, initiate flights shortly after sunset, following a predictable pattern of nightly departure and daytime rest. This temporal regularity is coordinated with the sun's position, temperature changes, and wind conditions, enhancing both efficiency and safety. Diurnal migrants, including storks and raptors, similarly adjust departure and flight patterns based on circadian cues, ensuring that flights coincide with favorable thermal currents and daylight visibility. This temporal alignment allows birds to conserve energy while maintaining precise migratory schedules. Seasonal clocks extend this principle over longer timescales, regulating the initiation and termination of migratory periods. These circannual rhythms are influenced by photoperiod, temperature, and food availability, but also exhibit endogenous properties, enabling birds to maintain a relatively consistent migratory calendar, even under variable conditions. Experiments in controlled environments have shown that migratory species continue to exhibit pre-programmed timing of departure and orientation behavior, indicating that internal clocks provide a baseline schedule that is fine-tuned by environmental feedback. The synchronization of circadian and seasonal rhythms with environmental cues is critical for successful navigation. Birds must anticipate changes in climate along their migratory path, aligning departure with favorable winds, thermals, and storm patterns. Temperature gradients and barometric pressure serve as additional modulators, influencing both the decision to initiate migration and the altitude and speed of flight. For example, studies of European starlings and white storks show that departures are often delayed until winds shift in favorable directions, illustrating the dynamic interaction between internal timing and real-time environmental assessment. Circadian regulation also interacts with sensory systems to optimize orientation. Time-compensated sun and star compasses rely on an accurate internal clock to adjust for the movement of celestial cues throughout the day and night. Molecular clocks provide the temporal framework for interpreting these cues, allowing birds to calculate direction and maintain headings even when visual cues are obscured. This integration ensures that navigation is consistent and precise, combining the predictability of internal rhythms with the variability of environmental input. Juvenile birds demonstrate the importance of timing in learning navigational strategies. Early in life, they rely heavily on innate circadian patterns to guide initial movements, gradually calibrating these rhythms based on experience with environmental conditions and social observation of adults. This learning process allows young birds to refine the interaction between internal clocks and external cues, developing a robust temporal and spatial understanding that supports independent migration in subsequent years. The flexibility of circadian and seasonal systems ensures that birds can adjust to changes in climate or habitat, maintaining migratory success despite environmental variability. Disruptions to circadian timing, whether through artificial light, habitat modification, or climatic anomalies, can have significant effects on migratory behavior. Birds exposed to altered light-dark cycles may initiate migration too early or too late, encounter adverse weather, or miss optimal feeding and stopover sites. These observations underscore the precision required in internal timing, illustrating that circadian and seasonal clocks are not merely supportive systems but fundamental drivers of migratory efficiency and survival. The relationship between molecular clocks, environmental cues, and navigation also demonstrates the integration of multiple sensory and cognitive systems. Birds do not rely solely on a single cue. Instead, circadian timing provides a scaffold that organizes the use of magnetic, celestial, visual, and olfactory information. Internal clocks regulate the periods of heightened responsiveness to these cues, modulate flight activity, and influence energy allocation. This ensures that orientation, navigation, and physiological preparation are harmonized across temporal scales, from the hourly rhythm of nocturnal flights to the annual cycle of long-distance migration. In practice, this means that migratory success depends on precise timing at every level. The ability to depart when conditions are optimal, maintain consistent headings, rest and refuel at appropriate intervals, and arrive at breeding or wintering grounds in synchrony with ecological conditions is all mediated by circadian and seasonal rhythms. Birds that fail to align internal timing with environmental realities face increased energy costs, heightened predation risk, and reduced reproductive success. Evolution has thus favored species with tightly integrated timing systems that coordinate internal physiology, sensory perception, and behavioral output. Ultimately, the study of circadian and seasonal rhythms highlights the elegance of avian migration as a temporal and spatial orchestration. By integrating molecular clocks, photoperiodic cues, environmental signals, and multimodal navigational information, birds achieve a level of precision that is both adaptive and resilient. Timing is not a peripheral concern. It is central to the success of long-distance migration, enabling birds to navigate with accuracy, efficiency, and flexibility across continents and oceans. These internal rhythms, honed by evolution and modulated by experience, allow birds to synchronize behavior with the ever-changing environment, ensuring that each migratory journey is as effective as it is extraordinary. Long-distance migration is not simply a matter of heading in the right direction. It is a carefully balanced exercise in energy management, biomechanics, and continuous decision-making. Birds undertaking journeys of thousands of kilometers must carefully regulate energy expenditure, ensuring that fat reserves, muscle efficiency, and oxygen delivery systems are all optimized for sustained flight. Energy allocation is influenced by flight mode, speed, altitude, and environmental conditions. For example, flapping flight provides thrust but is metabolically expensive, whereas gliding and soaring allow birds to cover long distances with minimal energy expenditure, particularly when combined with environmental features such as thermals, wind currents, or dynamic soaring over the ocean. Understanding the interplay between energy use and flight mechanics is essential to appreciating the sophistication of migratory behavior. Route choice is intimately connected to energetics. Birds select paths that minimize energy expenditure while maximizing the probability of survival and successful arrival at breeding or wintering grounds. Stopover sites where food and shelter are available function as strategic refueling stations. Research has shown that migratory species such as the bar-tailed godwit and the sooty shearwater optimize their sequences of stopovers to coincide with regions of high food abundance or favorable winds, balancing the risk of predation and weather exposure against the energetic benefits of each location. Decision-making in these contexts requires both innate programming and learned experience, as birds integrate environmental cues with memory of previous journeys to select routes that achieve the best overall efficiency. Social strategies also influence energetic efficiency. V-formation flight, commonly observed in geese, pelicans, and swans, reduces aerodynamic drag for trailing birds, allowing energy savings of up to 20% for individuals within the flock. Leadership rotation ensures that no single bird bears the full energetic cost of the led position for extended periods. The biomechanics of wing motion, spacing between individuals, and coordination within the group are tightly coupled, illustrating that collective behavior can enhance both energy economy and navigational accuracy. Observational studies by Daniel Weymouth-Kirsch and colleagues have documented these behaviors in albatrosses and other seabirds, highlighting the adaptive integration of mechanics, energetics, and group dynamics. Trade-offs between speed, energy, and risk are a constant consideration during migration. Faster flight can reduce travel time, minimizing exposure to predators or adverse weather, but it comes at the cost of increased energy expenditure. Conversely, slower, more energy-efficient flight conserves fat reserves, but may extend exposure to environmental hazards. Birds must assess these trade-offs dynamically, incorporating real-time information about wind patterns, thermals, temperature, and precipitation. For example, a migratory stork may delay departure to exploit a favorable thermal current, even if this means adjusting timing relative to other flock members, thereby balancing energy conservation against the need to maintain schedule and minimize risk. Biomechanics are closely linked to these decision-making processes. Wing shape, aspect ratio, and muscle power determine flight efficiency and influence the range and speed achievable by a species. Birds with long, narrow wings, such as albatrosses or frigate birds, are highly efficient at gliding and soaring, exploiting wind currents over open oceans. Species with broader wings, like raptors or pigeons, prioritize maneuverability in more complex landscapes but incur higher energy costs over long distances. Wing loading, the ratio of body mass to wing area, affects the ability to exploit thermals and maintain lift under variable conditions. These physical constraints shape migratory behavior, limiting the maximum distance achievable without refueling and influencing stopover selection and flight strategy. Cognitive demands also intersect with energetics and biomechanics. Birds must continuously process sensory information, including visual landmarks, wind direction, magnetic cues, and celestial orientation, while simultaneously regulating flight mechanics to conserve energy. Neural processing of these inputs allows dynamic adjustment of wing beat, flight altitude, and trajectory, ensuring that energy expenditure is optimized relative to environmental conditions. Birds also monitor their own physiological state, adjusting pace or flight mode in response to fatigue, fuel availability, or thermal stress. This combination of cognitive evaluation and physical adjustment demonstrates the sophistication of migratory decision-making as a continuous process rather than a series of discrete choices. Stopover strategies are a critical component of energy management. Birds must evaluate habitat quality, availability of food, predation risk, and proximity to favorable wind or thermal conditions when selecting locations to rest and refuel. Observational studies show that migratory species frequently choose stopovers that allow recovery while positioning themselves optimally for subsequent legs of the journey. These choices reflect both inherited preferences and experiential learning, as birds refine decisions based on prior success or failure. Stopover efficiency can have significant consequences for overall migration, influencing survival, reproductive success, and the ability to maintain precise timing with seasonal cycles. Environmental adaptation extends beyond stopover selection. Birds continuously adjust altitude to exploit wind gradients, reduce drag, or avoid turbulence, integrating real-time atmospheric data into flight mechanics. Thermals, particularly over landmasses heated unevenly by the sun, provide vertical lift that reduces the need for flapping. Oceanic birds exploit wind shear in dynamic soaring, converting changes in airspeed into forward motion without expending additional muscular energy. These strategies highlight how environmental awareness and biomechanical skill are inseparable components of migratory efficiency. Route planning also incorporates risk assessment. Birds may choose slightly longer paths to avoid mountainous terrain, areas of high predation, or regions of unfavorable weather. Such decisions reflect a balance between energetic cost and safety, demonstrating that optimal migration is not simply about the shortest distance, but the most effective combination of speed, energy conservation, and risk mitigation. This strategic approach is evident in large-scale tracking studies, where migratory paths frequently deviate from direct lines between origin and destination, reflecting nuanced decision-making that accounts for multiple interacting variables. Energy management is further enhanced by physiological adaptation. Migratory birds accumulate fat reserves before departure, sometimes exceeding 50% of body mass in species undertaking non-stop transoceanic flights. Muscle structure, metabolic enzyme distribution, and oxygen delivery systems are optimized for sustained aerobic activity. These physiological preparations work in concert with behavioral and biomechanical strategies, ensuring that energy is expended efficiently, flight performance is maintained over long distances, and survival during arduous journeys is maximized. Ultimately, the study of energetics, biomechanics, and decision-making reveals migration as a dynamic multidimensional process. Birds integrate internal physiological state, environmental information, social cues, and mechanical constraints to make continuous decisions that optimize efficiency and survival. The interaction between energy expenditure, flight mechanics, and cognitive evaluation ensures that migration is not only possible but highly effective, allowing birds to traverse continents and oceans with precision, resilience, and remarkable adaptability. Understanding these mechanisms underscores that migration is not simply a matter of direction or instinct, but an intricate balance of physics, physiology, and intelligent decision-making that enables birds to achieve one of nature's most extraordinary feats. Even the most skilled migratory birds are not immune to disorientation. Magnetic anomalies, sudden storms, dense cloud cover, and unexpected changes in wind patterns can disrupt orientation, forcing birds to adjust their strategies mid-flight. These environmental challenges highlight the inherent uncertainty in migration and reveal the remarkable cognitive and behavioral adaptations that allow birds to maintain accuracy under unpredictable conditions. Magnetic turbulence, for example, can temporarily misalign an avian compass, yet birds often recover quickly, suggesting that orientation is supported by multiple, redundant systems rather than relying on a single cue. Cognitive flexibility is central to this resilience. Birds are capable of recalibrating their navigation when a primary cue becomes unreliable, drawing on alternative sensory information to correct errors. When solar cues are obscured by clouds, they may rely more heavily on geomagnetic information or visual landmarks. Similarly, in nocturnal migrants, disruption of stellar orientation may prompt greater dependence on olfactory gradients or wind direction. This redundancy allows for real-time error correction, ensuring that cumulative deviations do not result in catastrophic navigational failure. The brain continuously integrates sensory input, evaluates reliability, and adjusts behavioral output, demonstrating a sophisticated level of flexibility that is essential for survival over long migrations. Experiments with displaced birds have provided compelling evidence of adaptive behavior in response to disorientation. Francesco Papi and his colleagues conducted a series of studies in which homing pigeons were transported hundreds of kilometers away from their familiar territories. Despite the dislocation, many birds successfully recalibrated their routes and returned home, utilizing a combination of magnetic cues, olfactory information, visual landmarks, and learned spatial knowledge. These experiments reveal that birds possess the cognitive tools to cope with unexpected changes in environment, integrating multiple streams of information to restore orientation and maintain migratory efficiency. The evolutionary implications of such resilience are profound. Redundancy in navigational systems and the capacity for cognitive recalibration likely confer significant selective advantages, enhancing survival during migration. Birds that can compensate for temporary errors or environmental disruptions are more likely to reach breeding or wintering grounds successfully, maintain energy reserves, and avoid predation. Over evolutionary timescales, these advantages have reinforced the development of complex multimodal navigation systems, producing populations capable of remarkable flexibility and precision. The interplay between environmental variability and cognitive resilience demonstrates that migration is not only a test of endurance, but also of adaptive intelligence. Error correction is closely linked to multimodal integration. Birds continuously compare inputs from different systems, magnetic, solar, stellar, olfactory, and visual, to detect inconsistencies and make adjustments. For instance, a slight deviation detected through geomagnetic input may be cross-checked against remembered landmarks or the relative positions of stars. When discrepancies are identified, birds adjust their heading to compensate, reducing the accumulation of navigational error over time. This process illustrates the importance of overlapping sensory modalities, where redundancy ensures that temporary failure in one system does not compromise the overall journey. Flexibility is also observed in the timing of flight. Birds may delay departure or adjust stopover durations in response to storms or wind shifts, demonstrating a behavioral form of resilience that complements sensory recalibration. Juvenile birds in particular show remarkable learning capacity during their first migrations, gradually refining their internal maps and calibrating their use of cues to respond to environmental variation. Over successive migrations, experience enhances both the speed and accuracy of these adjustments, highlighting the role of learning in reinforcing innate navigational mechanisms. Environmental noise can pose additional challenges. For example, urban light pollution, changes in vegetation, or temporary disruptions in magnetic intensity can interfere with one or more navigational cues. Birds respond to these challenges by increasing reliance on unaffected systems, such as adjusting headings based on remaining visual landmarks or utilizing olfactory gradients to compensate for visual or magnetic uncertainty. The capacity to weigh multiple sources of information, prioritize the most reliable cues, and make rapid adjustments exemplifies the cognitive sophistication underlying migratory resilience. Studies have also examined species-specific differences in adaptive navigation. Some birds, particularly long-distance migrants, exhibit heightened sensitivity to environmental changes, rapidly modifying flight altitude, route, or stopover selection in response to anomalies. In contrast, shorter-distance migrants may rely more heavily on learned landmarks or social guidance, emphasizing the diversity of strategies that evolution has produced. Across species, however, the principle of redundancy and the ability to integrate multiple cues remain consistent, reinforcing the central role of cognitive flexibility in successful migration. Redundancy and resilience are not limited to the sensory domain. Social behaviors, such as flocking, also contribute to error correction. Birds traveling in groups can observe the orientation and responses of companions, using collective judgment to compensate for individual miscalculations. This distributed form of decision-making enhances accuracy, particularly when environmental cues are unreliable or conflicting. By combining individual perception with social feedback, flocks create an emergent navigational intelligence that supports resilience across variable conditions. The study of disorientation and correction also informs our understanding of navigation under extreme or novel conditions. Birds encountering unfamiliar territories, magnetic anomalies, or weather events demonstrate the capacity to generate flexible strategies that extend beyond pre-programmed instincts. This adaptability ensures that even unexpected challenges can be met with effective responses, highlighting the integration of cognition, sensory processing, and experience in maintaining migratory success. Ultimately, natural errors, environmental perturbations, and sensory noise reveal the sophistication of avian navigation. Birds are not rigidly bound to fixed paths. They continuously monitor, evaluate, and adjust based on the reliability of multiple cues, demonstrating a cognitive resilience that is both flexible and robust. Redundancy across sensory systems, behavioral adjustments in response to environmental conditions, and social learning mechanisms collectively enable birds to cope with uncertainty, ensuring that migration remains successful despite the inevitable challenges encountered along the journey. This combination of adaptability, multimodal integration, and resilience exemplifies the extraordinary complexity and reliability of the migratory system, preparing the way for understanding how these mechanisms coalesce into an integrated, multi-layered navigational strategy. Migration is not merely a behavioral choice. It is deeply rooted in the biology of birds, with both genetic and epigenetic mechanisms shaping their ability to navigate across continents. Studies on the Eurasian blackcap, a small warbler known for its precise migratory routes, have provided compelling evidence that innate migratory direction is encoded in the genome. Experiments in the 1970s and 80s by Helmut Stern and others demonstrated that offspring of blackcaps inherit a preferred migratory orientation, even when raised in isolation from adult birds. These findings indicate that directional tendencies are genetically programmed, providing a baseline compass that guides early migration before experience or social learning modifies or refines behavior. Genetic control of migratory behavior extends beyond direction to encompass timing, duration, and physiological readiness. Birds possess genes that influence fat deposition, muscle endurance, and hormonal rhythms, ensuring that departures coincide with optimal seasonal conditions. These inherited traits interact with environmental cues, such as photoperiod and temperature, to modulate the onset of migration, revealing the intricate interplay between hardwired tendencies and external feedback. Molecular studies have identified candidate genes associated with circadian regulation, energy metabolism, and magnetoreception, highlighting the multi-layered genetic architecture that underpins migratory capability. epigenetic modulation adds another layer of complexity. Environmental factors experienced during development, such as temperature, food availability, or exposure to specific magnetic fields, can influence gene expression without altering DNA sequence. This epigenetic imprinting allows birds to adjust inherited migratory tendencies in response to local conditions, enhancing flexibility and adaptability. For example, birds hatched in regions with variable climate may exhibit subtle shifts in migratory timing or route preference, calibrated to optimize survival in a given ecological context. These adjustments are reversible in some cases, demonstrating that epigenetic mechanisms provide a dynamic bridge between genetic programming and experiential learning. Gene-environment interactions are particularly important in the context of magnetoreception and multimodal cue integration. Genetic predispositions provide sensitivity to geomagnetic fields, yet experience and environmental exposure calibrate the response, refining orientation accuracy. Birds raised in regions with distinct geomagnetic anomalies develop compensatory strategies, integrating magnetic cues with celestial, olfactory, and visual information. This interaction ensures that genetically encoded navigation is not rigid but responsive, allowing individuals to maintain precision even under variable or novel conditions. Such flexibility highlights the synergy between inherited capabilities and environmental feedback, producing navigation that is both reliable and adaptable. The interplay between inherited tendencies and learned behavior extends to social transmission as well. Juvenile birds often rely on adult guidance during their first migrations, observing routes, stopover sites, and timing strategies. While genetic programming sets initial preferences for direction and orientation, social learning enables refinement and calibration, allowing birds to benefit from collective knowledge. This combination of genetic predisposition, epigenetic modulation, and socially transmitted information results in a robust, flexible migratory system that balances innate guidance with adaptive learning, ensuring success across diverse environments and conditions. Experimental studies have further elucidated the heritability of migratory traits. Crossbreeding experiments in blackcaps, conducted over successive generations, revealed that offspring inherit partial directional tendencies from both parents, producing intermediate migratory orientations in mixed populations. These findings demonstrate that navigation is influenced by polygenic traits, with multiple genes contributing to overall behavior. The additive effects of these genes create a spectrum of orientation behaviors, allowing populations to maintain diversity in migratory strategies, which may be advantageous in unpredictable environments. Epigenetic processes also influence timing, flight endurance, and responsiveness to environmental cues. Seasonal changes in gene expression can trigger physiological preparation for migration, including fat accumulation, muscle hypertrophy, and shifts in circadian rhythms. These changes occur in concert with environmental signals such as photo period and temperature, demonstrating the integration of internal molecular clocks with external conditions. Birds that fail to synchronize genetic and epigenetic responses with seasonal cues experience increased energy expenditure, reduced survival, or delayed arrival at breeding grounds, emphasizing the evolutionary importance of precise temporal regulation. The resilience of migratory species is closely linked to these genetic and epigenetic mechanisms. Birds with flexible gene-environment interactions can adjust to shifting climates, habitat alteration, or novel migratory obstacles, maintaining survival and reproductive success. In species with strong genetic encoding of migratory direction, populations are generally more stable, preserving efficient migration routes over multiple generations. However, flexibility provided by epigenetic modulation ensures that populations are not overly constrained by genetic predisposition, allowing adaptation to new environments or changing ecological pressures. Inherited navigation is not limited to direction or timing. Genes also influence sensory capabilities, including magnetic sensitivity, visual acuity, and olfactory perception, which are critical for multimodal orientation. Birds with heightened genetic sensitivity to magnetic fields, for example, can detect subtle variations in inclination and intensity, enhancing the accuracy of long-distance navigation. When combined with experience, learned landmark recognition, and social information, these genetically encoded capabilities form the foundation for highly effective migratory behavior. Evolution has shaped these systems to maximize both precision and adaptability, Populations with robust genetic programming are able to establish consistent migratory corridors, ensuring efficient resource use and reproductive success. Simultaneously, the capacity for epigenetic adjustment and behavioral learning allows species to respond to environmental variability, mitigating the risk posed by climate change, habitat modification, or stochastic weather events. This dual strategy, genetic stability coupled with adaptive flexibility, has enabled migratory birds to persist across geological timescales, maintaining both species resilience and ecological success. Genetic studies also highlight the importance of interspecific variation. Different species exhibit varying degrees of innate orientation, sensitivity to environmental cues, and capacity for social learning, reflecting evolutionary adaptation to distinct ecological niches. Long-distance migrants often display stronger genetic encoding of direction and timing, while short-distance migrants may rely more heavily on social transmission and environmental feedback. These differences underscore that the combination of genetics, epigenetics, and learning is tailored to the specific challenges of each migratory strategy. Ultimately, the integration of genetic, epigenetic, and learned navigation creates a sophisticated system that enables birds to undertake extraordinary journeys. Inherited tendencies provide a reliable framework, epigenetic mechanisms adjust behavior to local and seasonal conditions, and learned or socially transmitted knowledge refines orientation and decision-making. This combination ensures that birds can navigate across continents with precision, flexibility, and resilience, maintaining survival and reproductive success in a world that is both complex and variable. By examining the interplay of genetics and experience, we gain insight into the deep evolutionary foundations of migration and the remarkable adaptability that allows species to traverse the globe year after year. The journey of a migratory bird is a marvel not only of endurance but of complex integration. No single sensory modality dictates the route. Instead, birds employ a sophisticated combination of landmarks, solar and stellar cues, magnetic perception, olfactory gradients, social learning, and cognitive processing to navigate across continents and oceans. Each of these systems provides unique information, and the true genius of avian migration lies in the ability to synthesize these inputs into coherent adaptive decisions. Landmarks, both macro and micro, provide spatial anchors, while the sun and stars supply celestial orientation. Magnetoreception offers a planetary reference, olfactory cues create environmental gradients, and social learning allows the transmission of knowledge across generations. Together, these systems form a multi-layered framework in which redundancy, flexibility, and robustness ensure navigational success even under unpredictable conditions. Henrik Moritzon's work has been pivotal in formalizing the concept of multi-cue integration. His research demonstrates that birds weigh information from multiple sources according to reliability and context, dynamically adjusting the importance of each cue during flight. For instance, under clear skies with minimal cloud cover, celestial orientation may dominate, whereas on overcast days, geomagnetic input or visual landmarks may take precedence. This flexible weighting allows birds to compensate for temporary failures or inconsistencies in any single system, ensuring resilience and accuracy over long distances. Moritzon's framework emphasizes that integration is not passive, but an active cognitive process in which birds continuously evaluate and prioritize information to maintain an optimal course. Redundancy is a key feature of this integrated navigation system. By possessing multiple, overlapping cues, birds reduce the risk of cumulative errors, ensuring that no single point of failure can jeopardize the journey. Solar, stellar, and magnetic cues operate alongside olfactory and visual inputs, providing independent streams of information that can be cross-validated in real time. When one source is compromised, others can compensate, illustrating the remarkable adaptability of the migratory system. This redundancy is essential not only for long-distance accuracy but also for survival, particularly when navigating complex or unpredictable environments, such as storm fronts, mountain ranges, or urbanized landscapes. Environmental inputs are continuously integrated into this framework. Wind patterns, thermal updrafts, precipitation, and topography influence flight path and altitude, while photoperiod and temperature affect timing and departure decisions. Birds do not process these variables in isolation. Instead, They incorporate them into an overarching cognitive map that merges sensory, social, and environmental information. The result is a dynamically updated representation of space and context, allowing real-time adjustment to environmental fluctuations, enhancing both efficiency and safety. Energy conservation, navigation accuracy, and risk mitigation are all balanced through this continuous integration, demonstrating the interplay of physiology, cognition, and ecology in migratory decision-making. Recent research highlights the integration of more subtle mechanisms into this multimodal framework. Quantum magnetoreception, for example, may allow birds to detect minute variations in Earth's magnetic field through radical pair reactions in cryptochromes, providing highly sensitive directional information even in challenging conditions. Experiments manipulating light wavelength or magnetic intensity reveal that these quantum effects can alter orientation behavior, suggesting that the chemical and quantum levels of perception feed directly into the bird's cognitive map. Combined with classical magnetoreception, celestial orientation, and other cues, quantum magnetoreception represents a cutting-edge component of the multi-cue system, demonstrating that migration operates at scales ranging from the subatomic to the planetary. Technological advances are also contributing to our understanding of multimodal navigation. GPS tracking, AI-driven flight modeling, and automated behavioral observation allow researchers to monitor migration with unprecedented precision. Data from these studies reveal how birds adjust flight speed, altitude, and trajectory in response to wind currents, social dynamics, and environmental variability. Machine learning algorithms help identify patterns of cue integration, clarifying how birds weigh conflicting information and make optimal navigational decisions. Behavioral ecology studies in turn provide context for these observations, demonstrating the evolutionary pressures that have shaped multimodal navigation strategies across species and populations. Social learning is woven seamlessly into this integrated system. Juvenile birds often rely on adults for initial route knowledge, observing both the timing and choice of stopovers. Flocks function as collective decision-making units, allowing individuals to benefit from the accumulated experience of the group. This social transmission complements genetic predispositions and environmental calibration, ensuring that multi-generational knowledge is preserved while remaining adaptable to changes in climate, habitat, or resource availability. In this way, navigation is simultaneously individual, social, and species-wide, reflecting the interplay of inherited capability, experiential learning, and population-level adaptation. Integration of multiple cues is also reflected in behavioral flexibility. Birds adjust heading, flight altitude, and stopover strategies depending on cue reliability, environmental conditions, and physiological state. Redundant cues allow for error correction when one system provides ambiguous or misleading information. For example, magnetic anomalies or storms may temporarily disrupt geomagnetic perception, but visual landmarks or olfactory gradients can compensate. Conversely, when landmarks are unavailable, magnetic and celestial cues dominate. This dynamic weighting ensures that birds can maintain orientation even under conditions that might challenge human navigators. Cognitive mechanisms play a central role in synthesizing this complex information. The hippocampus, grid cell analogues, and other brain regions support the encoding, recall, and integration of spatial information from multiple modalities. Birds continuously evaluate the relative reliability of cues, detect inconsistencies, and update mental maps in real time. This neural processing allows rapid adjustments to heading, flight strategy, and timing, ensuring that decision-making reflects both immediate conditions and long-term experience. Cognitive load is distributed across multiple sensory and neural channels, allowing birds to process vast amounts of information efficiently without overwhelming any single system. From an evolutionary perspective, multimodal integration enhances both resilience and adaptability. Populations that can combine genetic predispositions, sensory redundancy, social learning, and environmental awareness are better equipped to cope with climate change, habitat alteration, and stochastic weather events. Flexibility and redundancy reduce mortality risks and improve migratory efficiency, ensuring that survival and reproductive success are maximized. The evolutionary success of long-distance migratory species can thus be seen as a direct consequence of the capacity to integrate multiple sources of information across scales ranging from molecular to ecological. Reflecting on the synthesis of these systems, It is remarkable how migration unites processes at every level of biology. Quantum phenomena at the molecular scale influence chemical reactions in the retina, providing directional information that feeds into neural circuits in the brain. These circuits integrate social cues, memory of landmarks, magnetic and celestial inputs, and real-time environmental feedback to generate adaptive flight decisions. Physiological mechanisms such as energy optimization and muscle efficiency interact with atmospheric conditions to shape flight performance, while behavioral strategies coordinate group movement and stopover selection. Across continents, these integrated systems produce migrations that are both highly precise and flexible, allowing birds to navigate vast and variable environments with extraordinary skill. In synthesizing multimodal navigation, it becomes clear that migration is not simply the sum of its parts. Each sensory system, neural mechanism, and behavioral strategy contributes to a network of interdependent processes, with redundancy and flexible weighting providing robustness under uncertainty. Birds are simultaneously processors of quantum information, interpreters of magnetic fields, analysts of celestial patterns, learners of social knowledge, and decision-makers in complex dynamic environments. This integration illustrates the profound complexity of migration, highlighting the remarkable ways in which life has evolved to navigate, survive, and thrive across a planet of vast distances and ever-changing conditions. Ongoing research continues to expand our understanding of these integrated systems. Advances in quantum biology, AI tracking, remote sensing, and behavioral ecology promise to reveal new dimensions of cue interaction, neural processing, and adaptive strategy. These studies not only deepen our understanding of bird migration, but also offer insights into general principles of sensory integration, decision-making, and resilience that apply across species. Ultimately, the synthesis of multimodal navigation demonstrates that migration is a phenomenon where the microscopic and the global, the quantum and the ecological, converge to produce one of the most extraordinary and enduring feats of the natural world.